No matter what happens in the upper management of Red Bull, on solid ground, on the track, Max Verstappen unfortunately does what he wants with the RB20 single-seater. The Dutchman showed a significant advantage over Sergio Perez even at the Jeddah circuit, despite a layout that suits the Mexican's driving style. There weren't many corners where the Dutchman could make a difference, perhaps a couple, but in terms of pace, the world champion showed spikes of 7/10 of a second per lap, a gap that existed with the same strategy. Bad news for the competition, as things went worse than a year ago, when the Dutchman had more difficulty in getting back to the top and finished behind his teammate. Scuderia Ferrari confirmed itself as the second force on track, but with a gap to reduce against Red Bull that the SF-24 has halved as compared to last year, while not completely eliminating it. If Max Verstappen couldn't be beaten, could Charles Leclerc beat Sergio Perez with a less loaded rear wing? We saw that the Ferrari driver tried to resist against at least one Red Bull from the start and see what he could do behind Max Verstappen by trying to take advantage of his slipstream. This plan lasted only 4 laps until Sergio Perez struck at Ferrari's weakest point in Jeddah, the first straight. Charles Leclerc could not resist a 25 km/h difference in the overtaking, yet he tried to stay in DRS zone, but the counter-overtake was out of the question. At the same point on the next lap, the SF-24 in a more loaded configuration than its direct competition was only 12 km/h faster, making a counterattack impossible. Even Oliver Bearman, despite being the only one with soft tires in the first stint, and had his concerns. The cars around him had less resistance in the straight with the DRS closed and more efficiency with the DRS open. Therefore, there's a feeling that part of the car's potential was wasted. Fred Vasseur has said several times this year that his team should not be afraid to make bold choices if they can give Ferrari a potential advantage. Well, in Saudi Arabia, it's not clear to us whether Ferrari's choice was brave or cautious. Certainly, gathering more data in free practice with at least one run in a less loaded configuration would have helped to understand this, something that reminded of the approach made in Miami and in Jeddah 2 years ago. However, at that moment, such a decision was understandable without significant data available for teams. The final performance of the Ferrari cars facilitates the thought that they were once again too cautious, looking at the totally flat degradation curve on the Arabian race circuit. The Maranello team's drivers could have done another 10 laps at a sustained pace, while a Red Bull without pressures had started its slight drop in a reasonable usage window. It seems no coincidence that Charles Leclerc complained about low tire temperature problems since the qualifying session, and then also pointed out this issue in the first laps of use in the race or restarting from the safety car period. He also talked about a specific setup configuration that bothered him in some parts. It's possible that a less loaded configuration could have helped to open different options, especially in terms of stiffness and triggering rear tire temperatures, freeing up the use of the hybrid system sooner thanks to a more significant curve in the high-speed sector. The fact that it was discarded denotes some nightmares that should definitely be dispelled, trusting more in the high load generated by the SF-24. Carlos Sainz surprisingly watched the race on the monitor in the garage with the engineers, rather than on the hospital bed, after a sudden appendicitis sent him urgently out of the Jeddah race weekend on Friday morning. The reserve driver at that moment in Saudi Arabia was the 18-year-old Oliver Bearman, who was called to the car just 2 hours before the third and final free practice session. Scuderia Ferrari couldn't ask for better from their youngster, treated with great care by Riccardo Adami, to whom, moreover, a round of applause should be given for the serenity transmitted to him. The Englishman was the youngest debutant on a Ferrari Formula One car and had a perfect weekend, no slip-ups and steady nerves. The speed was not in question as he always showed in the factory simulator. The problem was the adaptation without significant track tests with the SF-24 single-seater. However, the procedures had been adequately refreshed with the F1 75 in Barcelona, but his composure and calmness impressed, even with the management of the hybrid in the key phases of the race. A bit of luck never hurts. If it had happened with the SF-23 these days, it would not have gone like this. Moreover, the opponent's strategy of extending the stints of Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris under safety car could not pay off with zero degradation on the harder tires. Oliver Bearman finished ahead of a McLaren and a Mercedes, just as Charles Leclerc did, which was simply perfect for the Constructors' Championship. If there were any doubts regarding the abilities of the Ferrari Driver Academy member, they should have vanished, and Haas would do well to prepare him carefully for a seat in the 2025 Formula One Championship. Finally, let's focus on some other important news that emerged during the Saudi Arabian weekend for Ferrari. After Loic Serra, another Mercedes man is heading towards Ferrari. Jerome D'Ambrosio will not be Toto Wolff's successor in Mercedes. Jerome D'Ambrosio is currently the driver development director, and therefore responsible for the young drivers of the Brackley team. After his experience in Formula E as team principal of Venturi, he has been linked several times even to the role of Toto Wolff's successor, or, in case of a lesser presence at the races by the Austrian boss, as a race director. In the last hours, there was confirmation in the Italian media that Jerome D'Ambrosio had already decided at the end of 2023 to return with his family to continental Europe, separating from Mercedes. Currently, what will happen is that the former Belgian Lotus driver is still working in the factory in Brackley until further notice. Nevertheless, he will leave England at the end of the 2024 Formula One season to later take on the role of director of the Ferrari Driver Academy, currently occupied by Jock Clear. The experienced English technician, in turn, will hand over that delicate yet demanding role, but will not leave the Maranello team, as he will be employed more actively in Formula One activities, also in the factory.